Good evening. Welcome everybody to the Ways and Means Committee meeting, this being Wednesday, May 16th, 5:30. We will commence with this evening's Ways and Means meeting, and as we normally do, I ask you to please stand and face the flag for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And if I could ask you please to remain standing for a moment of silence for those who have served our nation and our armed forces, home and abroad, and for those who have provided to this country the ultimate sacrifice for our liberties. Thank you. Please have a seat. Okay. This evening we do have some new business. Actually, before that, I ask that this clerk of the council please conduct a roll call.
Councillor Reynolds?
Here.
Councillor Flaherty? Here. Councillor Maglio? Here. All present.
Thank you. Okay, so new business this evening is 23031, Mayor, request for appropriation, CPC appropriation, historic inventory, or take up any action relative thereto. And I'd ask and welcome Director Santucci-Razzi this evening. You'll be first up for new business, and we would ask you to stick around for the follow-on budget business. So the floor is yours if you'd like to open up with a statement.
In regards to the historic inventory?
To motion 23031.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the Ways and Means. Melissa Santucci-Razzi here on behalf of the Department of Planning and Community Development and also the Historic Commission this evening. This request that we have before you this evening was discussed by the Community Preservation Committee, and they provided a favorable recommendation to the mayor, in which he forwarded on the materials to the Ways and Means Committee and the council. This is for a historic inventory, and it's a listing of about 100 plus properties. Let me just double check my notes here. Yeah, over 100 properties that what we're going to be doing is using Eaton Architects to do an inventory form for that. And those are the forms that you would find on the Mass Historical website, where they not only inventory the architecture of the structure, but they also go into detail if there was any other pertinent individuals that lived there, or if there were any activities that took place in that particular structure during a significant period in Braintree's history. So the request, we do already have $30,000 that was set aside for this funding. This was a project that had started under the previous director, and we just had a chance to kind of get it back going now. And we did receive some bids for about $45,000, hence the additional $15,750 on top of the $30,000 that we already have. So we have somebody in place, Eaton Architects out of New York. We have vetted them with Mr. Michael Steinite, who is the director of the Mass Historic Commission, and he feels very confident in the work that they've completed in some other communities. I'll call out Salem, because they have a pretty historic nature and significance as well. So again, we're here for $15,750, and that will be the final funding in order to execute this piece of historic inventory in the town of Braintree on behalf of the Historical Commission. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Director Santucci-Razzi. So I'd ask Councilor Flaherty, do you have any questions or comments?
Thank you. Once we have completed the historical inventory, how does anybody access it for information in the future?
It's available on the Mass Historic website, and there are already several properties that have been inventoried in the community. So you would just search by address, and any forms that were completed for that particular address will appear on the website.
Okay, so you open up the website, you plug in the address that you're interested in, and see what comes up?
There's a little bit more than that. You have to go to the historic inventory section, and they actually denote them as MACRIS is what the acronym is for the forms. Mass
Cultural
Access-
Resource Information Systems.
There we go.
If I may jump in, you can search by town, right? So the Mass Cultural Resource Database, maintained by the Secretary of State of Mass Historic, easily accessible, easily searchable. You can right now hop on a Braintree, see what's listed. And this will be an opportunity to update that information and bring forward that data. You would be surprised that you would expect most historic structures would be on there, not necessarily will they be. And so this would be able to bring that information forward.
Who typically uses this resource?
Architects use it, people looking to create historic district, cultural districts. They're used in support of reviewing demolition delay applications. That would be typically what we would be using it for. Or if there's just interest in a property, you would be able to determine, again, if there was any significance beyond the actual architecture of it, who lived there, what took place there. Some of them have more, some of them just simply talk about what the actual structure looks like, and then, some of them get very lengthy in detail, and then if you were looking to beyond a historic district, your next step would be if you wanted to nominate a project for the state register, you would need a bunch of this information, and then obviously there's the national register, which eventually, if it had a lot of significance, the information in the MACRIS form would help support and would contain essentially all of that information.
So when we do the inventory, what information is included for each entry for a house that's added on?
I'd have to pull up a sample of the form, but it talks about the year it was built. It talks about the architectural, the roof line, the style of the house, the period of the house, the style of siding on the house, any exterior features. And then the second sections get into the more, did something significant in history happen there, or is somebody who was integral and significant to the history of a particular community, did they live there, did they stop by there? I mean, you might even see one that George Washington was there once, or so-and-so stopped on a train at this particular location. So it depends on the location and again, how significant it really is. The form would have more information. Some are pretty straightforward, and then some are more detailed. And it also has a picture as well.
Okay, and how old must a home be before it is included in the registry?
It's not that hard and fast, Counselor. It's, communities need to spend the money to inventory these. So the Historic Commission wants this project to kind of just be ongoing, and that we continue to inventory. There's 140 that are on this list now, and some of them have already been inventoried, and then some is just updating the inventories. These go back to, there's some in the 1700s, there's a lot in the 1800s, 1693 is in here, 1663. Yeah, a few in the 1600s, and then the rest are in the 1700s and the 1800s.
Right, so it makes sense to me that the 16, 17, and 1800 houses would definitely be on there. To me, that's intuitively old. But then, what about a mid-century home that has been well-preserved since the 1950s, or a home, not that there's, oceans of people from Braintree who are famous, but maybe the that house on Pilgrim Road where the New Kid on the Block guy lived.
Yeah,
He's
that's not
famous.
really what, no, that, no. Respectfully, that's really not what Mass Historic, they don't care about New Kids on the Block like we do. It's typically older homes. I would be surprised if you saw something in the 1950s. I mean, that's just kind of starting the cusp of demo delay. We do demo delay here for 75 years. So you wouldn't necessarily be inventorying a home that you wouldn't be subject to a demo delay ordinance, but you could see some things like in the early 1900s. Yeah, the list was put together, this list, I believe, was put together by the town, just predated my involvement.
Okay, so it sounds like the homes are basically 1900 and earlier.
Correct.
And the list of which homes we want to include or update on is already created.
Correct.
Okay. And as I recall, we allocated money for this just before COVID.
Yep, that was the
And
30.
That was what?
That was the 30,000.
Right. So now we're adding money to that. What happened? Was it just COVID that interrupted the decision to proceed?
There was, nobody that was qualified actually submitted a proposal for that piece. And then this was kind of in the transition of directors in the department, bless you. And frankly, this just wasn't something that was a top priority when I took over in the department. And now that we've taken care of some of the other more pressing community preservation priorities, Liz has had a chance to get back to this and bring it forward. It's definitely a priority for the Historic Commission, but, you know, when you've got 5 or 6 boards and they all have priorities, we try to, you know, manage those as best as we can.
I'm certainly happy to support this tonight. I think it's great that we are doing a little bit of historic inventory in town. Braintree has a good amount of history. I'm glad to learn a little bit about what it is and what to expect when it's done and how to access it. I think sometimes in Braintree, we are overwhelmed with the number of things we want to do, and then we can't get to them all, and we wind up paying even more money. And this is a case where that has happened, and it's not the first one that I can think of. It's concerning because I think that the root cause of it is to do with understaffing, and that is related to our budget, which we'll talk about later tonight. But I'm going to support this, and thank you for bringing it forward.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Maglio, questions or comments?
That was very illuminating, and I appreciate all of that information. I don't have any pressing questions. I do want to just double check that it is the Mass Historical Commission on the Secretary of State's website is what we're talking about for the listing.
Correct.
Okay, all right, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, again, very thorough, so I'll repeat that. And I don't have any questions, and I think this is a good effort. So, do we have a motion for favorable recommendation to the full council?
Motion for favorable recommendation to the full council that in accordance with the provisions of Chapter 44B of the general laws and with the recommendation of the Community Preservation Committee, the appropriation of $15,750 from the Historic Resources Fund for the Historic Resources Survey 2020 additional funds, FY23 CPA application. Said funds shall be expended under the direction of the Community Preservation Committee and the Director of Planning and Community Development.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that is unanimous. Thank you. So, do we have a motion to take off of the table Order 23025?
Motion to take off the table Order 23025.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. So, first up on this evening's scheduled review of the fiscal 2024 budget is planning and community development. So, any opening statements from the planning director?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very briefly, I think everyone's probably had a chance to take a look at the budget for the Department of Planning and Community Development. In my opinion, pretty straightforward. You'll see obviously some adjustments in salaries. Most of the items have remained the same. Some have been zeroed out because they're just not activities that we're doing now. And available to answer any questions in regards to this budget. Also have submitted the community preservation budget. Would you like me to review that at this time, Mr. Chairman? This one has a little more explanation.
Yes, please, go right
Okay.
ahead. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, that's correct. We have not taken that off the table as of yet.
Oh,
So we will
okay,
wait.
then I'll hold
Let's
off on
wait
that.
till after we take care of the
Okay.
budget.
Yep, no
Thank you.
worries. So back to the main budget again, fairly straightforward, line items intact. Some have been zeroed out because they're not activities that we're doing any longer. And I've provided some notes in my narrative, which I do a form of a spreadsheet, just a little more straightforward. We don't have a lot of ongoing, there was some different things that had come through, questions about ongoing education and things like that, and that is very limited in the department. We do trainings from time to time, and we use the line item that we have set aside for that in the various functions, whether it be planning, conservation, or zoning. So available for any questions, or if there's anything that you would like me to cover in more detail, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Santucci-Brazzi. So first up, I'd like to ask Councilor Flaherty if there are any questions or comments.
My main question is, you know, this budget is very lean. Overall, you are, what does it say? You're down 1.1%. How much cut did you take last year?
Last year, I think I was close to 3.
And do you happen to know how much you were cut the year before that?
Almost 11.
So you were cut by 11%, and then you were cut by 3%, and now, per the instructions given by the administration, you're cut by 1.1%.
Correct.
Okay. So when we make cuts, we always see, you know, some savings in our budget. But then it can come back round and get you on the other end of things, and I think we're seeing that with, especially, I don't see all the interior things that happen inside the office and in the dealings with the public or perhaps with private entities who are interested in developing in Braintree. I'm not privy to those kinds of interactions, but I do see it when we don't meet our obligations on community preservation. And because of the economy, that always shows up when we need more money to complete a project. So my question for you is the extent to which you think that this budget, which has taken cuts over cuts, year-over-year cuts, is going to be adequate to meet the needs of Braintree without incurring additional unforeseen expenses that are related to just not being able to get the job done?
That's a difficult question, Counselor. We do now have a part-time CPC person, which has sort of helped, and we've kind of gotten caught up to those responsibilities. You know, we'll do the best that we can to try to not have those situations arise. I think bidding in general over the past couple of years has been unusual compared to years in the past in regards to your comments to CPC. I mean, ideally, you know, I think everybody would want some more money and some more staffing, but we will do the best and try to serve the residents and the town of Braintree the best that we can with the money that we do have.
I appreciate your willingness to do the best you can, and I have every confidence in the world that you will do. I also believe that you are doing the best you can, and we just can't get to all of it because to what extent would you say that the difficulties that you face in the office are related to a shortage of labor in the office?
The department is down. there is a vacant position, and there are also 2 unfunded positions. I mean, that's, you know, I would prefer not to talk in more detail than that this evening. I think that is self-explanatory. Obviously, more people, more work gets done. And, you know, I just continue to work and do more work to get it done. But, I mean, I think it's the all-around answer is, does more people get more work done? You know, I think that's a yes across the board. I don't think that's germane to my department.
No, not specifically. I agree. Can you, unless there are some privacy concerns, can you describe the 2 unfunded positions that you have at present?
That's the staff planner and the principal planner.
Can you tell me, if you were to be able to hire those 2 tomorrow, how much salary do you think that would cost the town?
The principal planner is at the same pay grade as some of my other planners. That would be, a step 13 BPMA position, the principal planner. Mid-range salary is probably in the early 80s. And the staff planner, I actually don't have the information for that particular job. That job is a very entry-level position. If I had to guess, it's probably in the low 60s.
Okay, so understanding that this is just back-of-the-envelope math, to fully fund your department, we would need $140,000.
There's some other funds that come along with staff people, union obligations, mileage, so it's not just the actual salary. So it would be in addition to the numbers that you had stated, Counselor.
Thank you. That is very helpful, and I appreciate your comments.
Thank
I don't
you.
think that was easy.
Okay, thank you, Counselor. Counselor Maglio, questions or comments?
Yes, please, thank you. So, just in terms of those 2 numbers that you gave for those 2 unfunded positions, I would imagine it would be about a 20% overhead, benefits, things like that.
I'm not even talking, if I may, through the chair, on that side of things. I'm just talking like what I would
Straight
actually put
salary.
into.
About-
Yeah.
okay.
It's probably not that much. Those benefits are absorbed by probably human resources, but just
Right.
kind of looking at what I carry for each employee and union obligations, mileage, supplies, they need a computer, you know, that type of stuff.
Okay, great, thank you. So, about how many hours a week do you work?
It varies. It varies.
So, how many hours a week are you hired for?
35 plus night meetings.
Okay, so I see you at early morning meetings, I see you at night meetings, I see you on weekends, I see you multiple times per week, and I would venture to guess that you may work upwards of 50 and 60 hours some weeks?
That's fair.
Okay.
That's fair.
Maybe 2 weeks out of the month, if we were to look at the year, maybe every other week?
It varies. Some weeks are heavy on meetings, and then the off weeks are heavy on getting work done. So it kind of, you know, getting ready for those meetings. It's
Right.
It's kind of a cycle: work meetings. But,
Sure.
It's some weeks it's a lot.
Do you get overtime?
I do not.
Okay, so for your salaried position of 35 plus some night meetings, we're looking at you working 50 to 60 hours a week. And I would say that to a large extent, that some of your unfunded positions might actually make your job less demanding in that you would be overseeing and supporting some planners to do some of that work so that it wasn't all stacked on you and your existing team. Would that be a fair assessment?
That would be fair.
Okay. So one of the issues that we hear about all the time as counselors, or just even as residents of the town, is how we need to see more development happening. And development is a function of planning. And the kind of development that people are talking about is not so much a specific vision. It's more like, why are there empty stores? And why are there so many empty office buildings? And why are there so many sites that nothing seems to be happening at? And so I would think that the planning part of the planning department is kind of focused on those issues.
Yes, we are, and hence the master plan is really sort of the major focus on visioning for these sites that you speak of, Counselor.
So I would think that investing in those positions would be a large step forward in meeting some of those other needs, and would actually create more investments in the town in terms of paying us back in multiple dividends in terms of that visioning for the future. Fair statement?
I think that has a little bit more to it. You know, the development climate, the local property owners, there's a little bit more. There needs to also be a willingness on the outside to discuss on the inside. So that's a little bit more than I would say 100% staff related.
Okay, so the staff activity part is the part that are there as, you know, partners, planners with that outside interest, and to kind of help broker those connections and help look for those opportunities and help create a climate where people are interested in investing and developing, and there's a willingness from the community to welcome that in. There's both work that I would think that your department would do, is to work with some of the community and organizing the community, as
Correct.
well as to work with the developers and help them come up with a plan that meets the needs of the town, as well as what the town is willing to accept.
Fair.
Okay. So to me, given that that is a great need in the town, I just have to say that it's got to be tough. It's got to be tough being in your position, because you're the one that's out there in front. I know you have a great team. I'm sure that you all work well together, but that's a tough position in any municipality. And it's just made even tougher when we're looking at an 11% cut, a 3% cut, and then a 1.1% cut. And it's almost as if we are, you know, cutting off our own opportunities. And that is kind of my assessment, based on what I see in the budget, what I see in terms of the information that comes out of your office, and what I see in terms of this budget that's before us. I think I'm going to hold off right there, because in terms of other questions, I mean, there's nothing in your budget. There's nothing to even ask about, because your budget has been stripped so bare, and we need a hardy, robust director of planning with a hardy, robust staff, and I hope that that's what we can do someday soon. So I'm going to yield over to Councilor Reynolds. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Maglio. So, I share a lot of very similar concerns that I believe your department plays a significant role in the health of this community. And you do Herculean work as a director. However, the way I see it is that we are in dire need of growth in this community. And I hear talk from the mayor's office about how we're going to pursue life sciences and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. But I see no action. I do see in your budget that there's a life science development. It's zero budgeted, but the comment is the town received, as in past, grants from economic development. I see a number of items that the town received grants from economic development. So, before I go on that, can you tell me, are these ongoing grants? Do you need to apply for them? Is this truly something from the past tense, or is there anything that's in place? And I'll take one specific, life science development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I think Margaret LaForest can speak a little bit in more detail about that funds, but there have been set aside funds to the town of Braintree for economic development, and I do have a pending proposal that I've reached out to Metropolitan Area Planning Council on doing sort of the, I guess I would call it the next phase of the initial study that they had done post-life science corridor. The date of that I don't have off the top of my head, but those things are something that are very real, and the money is very real as well. And I will hand that over to Ms. LaForest to speak a little bit more about the what and where that money came from.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the town of Braintree did receive some earmark funds from the Commonwealth that we are working through how best to expend them.
Any way you can give me a dollar amount, approximate, anything?
Sure, there were two grant awards, one for $500,000, one for $166,000. We had a strategy session just yesterday, myself, Melissa, Liz in CPC, as well as Lorraine C., our Contracts and Grants Administrator, bring me up to speed, and we on kind of what fundings, what eligible uses are for these funds. And I think you'll be hearing from us shortly about what that strategy is going to be, about economic development, about small business supports, about, life sciences was one that is a clear priority for the administration, and Melissa has really done her homework, and I think to your comment about needing a hardy, robust director, I am quite impressed with the volume of work and the professionalism of the planning team. They're impressive and up to speed on everything. So we are pursuing that. We have active Community One Stop from the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development. We're talking about, that has a June submission, that we're looking at what's the best submission opportunity there. So it's not only is it funds eligible to be spent now that we're working on executing, as well as what other opportunities are out there that we can be going after.
Great, thank you for that. I will say, my observations over the last 2 years, as well as the previous 2 years, there hasn't been any published policy at all from this mayor's office on anything to do with economic development policy outside of saying, we're going to do this, and then crickets. And I'm not trying to be piling on here, but I think it's shared by my committee members here that there is a huge problem in this community, and it has been for a long time, and more exacerbated again by COVID, because that's a common thread throughout the country and throughout the state, across municipalities, that caused a lot of difficulty. But the problem in Braintree is, from my point of view, is that We had a big problem before COVID hit us, and it only exacerbated things worse. And we cannot rely on saying COVID, COVID, COVID all the time. There hasn't been one plan, one economic development, or really any kind of policies that have been published that says this is our plan to get things done and to address a problem. So I'm encouraged to hear what you're saying, that there's going to be something forthcoming, and I look very much forward to seeing what that is. But I'm also concerned about the bandwidth, or the lack thereof, of resources in the planning department. To your point, I can't agree more, any more than I already do, about the level of work and effort that Ms. Santucci-Rossi puts in, and to an extent her assistant director as well. She absolutely is applauded, and she's a superwoman. She's a rock star in that sense. But we need more than just Melissa Santucci working crazy hours and doing all this types of stuff. We need real resources that are deliberate in going out and creating economic development and saying, well, it's coming, it's coming. I mean, it's disappointing that here we are in the later half of the fourth year of a four-year term of our current mayor, and we haven't heard a darn thing from economic development. Now all of a sudden, oh, we're going to do all these things. So pardon my skepticism, okay?
I think, Mr. Chairman, you know my background and what I came for. and
I do
hope
know your
that
background.
that the mayor's brought me in to be helpful in this area.
But you cannot change the world all by yourself in 6 months.
No,
So that's my skepticism. Part of it is, and again, it's not a doubt in faith of you and your skill set at all.
we'll do our best.
Okay, I can only draw on what I've seen in 4 years, and I pay very close attention. As Ms. Santucci-Rossi knows, planning is near and dear to my heart, having worked 14 years in that area specifically, and then having worked in the mayor's office and then doing this, that it's always in the forefront. When we look at our growth coming in, on average over the last 10 years, less than what our expenditures are on a daily basis, when we see all of these cuts, and particularly from the planning department's perspective, an 11% cut, then followed by a 3% cut, followed by a 1.1%. We're going in the wrong direction. And, I haven't even started on housing. I mean, you come from an economic development background, and I think I'd be preaching to the choir and said, life sciences isn't coming to Braintree without an adequate infrastructure available for them, because we as a regional economy in the greater Boston area, we're on the edge right now of losing a really good thing because we don't have housing. And it's not, when you hear the naysayers say subsidized housing. That's bunk in my book. That is a deflection of what we really, really need in this town from an economic development standpoint. We need a reliable transportation network. Well, we're working with the state on that, and boy, they got to get off their duff and get that fixed. But from a housing perspective, and there have been numerous. I could come back here with a list, 10 pages long, minimum, of all the problems that we have from a housing perspective, all of these studies that show housing is an economic driver, and I call it one of the three stools of a healthy economy: housing, tax policies, and development policies. We have really, in this town, over the last number of years, maybe 1 out of 3. That doesn't even meet meatloaf's 2 out of 3 ain't bad, right? Just as a little 1980s reference there for those who caught that.
Pretend I didn't.
All right.
Sorry.
So, anyways, as you can tell, I mean, I'm pretty passionate about this, and I don't want to see us continuing going down a hole. So I think that our planning department deserves a lot more attention, more deliberate, and I'm looking forward to find out what's going to happen. I could go on this, and I'll wait. There'll be more opportunity for me to talk about that. So, Are there any, speaking of staff, are there any positions that were funded last year in fiscal '23, I should say this current year, that was funded in the budget for fiscal '23 that went unoccupied throughout the year and that are now in the fiscal '24 budget as well, being planned to be funded?
Can you repeat that?
Sure.
Did you ask about funded or unfunded?
All right, so you mentioned earlier to a previous question that you talked about the number of staff you have, and you said that you had a couple of positions that you haven't filled, right? And those are positions, they have one position that was funded in the fiscal '23 budget, it was funded, but the position never got filled.
So, if I may, Mr. Chairman, that's the zoning administrator position.
Okay.
That was funded and that has been continually funded. Connor Murphy previously held that position. He was upgraded to assistant director. We finally filled that position in February. The person that took the job worked for about 3 months and then quit.
Okay. In the fiscal '23 year?
Correct.
Okay, and how long ago was that position vacated?
Couple weeks.
A couple weeks ago? Okay, thank you.
It's reposted.
All right, so thank you. That's what my next question you
Yes,
anticipated.
it's reposted, and that one is funded, proposed to be funded in this one. The other two were not funded last fiscal year. The principal planner hasn't been funded for probably 6 or 7 years, and the staff planner probably hasn't been funded for, I'd say, 3 or 4. When I took over as the director in December of 2020,
Wasn't Connor Murphy the principal planner at one point?
no, he was the staff planner.
So he went from staff planner to assistant director?
No, staff planner to zoning administrator to, well, intern to staff planner. Connor's been with us forever.
All right, yeah.
Thank God.
Okay.
So yeah, he's had several positions and sort of worked his way up.
Okay.
So that position, he was the last person to hold that position,
Okay.
which was 3 positions ago for him. So I think it was about 3
So
or 4 years.
so are you going to be funding either one of those positions this year?
No.
So, pardon me. Okay, thank you. My line of questioning was this. Pardon me. I was very concerned this year in supplemental number 1, where there was a sweep of funded positions, that a number of items, one of them being funded positions that were vacant, that were swept out and used to partially fund the supplemental number 1, okay? That is a big concern of mine because it takes away a service that we anticipate and is part of our deliberations and certainly the intention of when this budget was first submitted, that these positions would be funded, there would be a service being delivered on behalf of the taxpayers to meet a need of the town. So, you've answered my questions that there isn't a position. I'd be very concerned if I saw a position that get funded this year but was not funded last year, that was funded last year, wasn't filled last year, or if it fell into the category that was swept, right, as part of helping us find additional funds to operate our town before the fiscal year ends. So there's nothing that in your budget that pertains to that?
No, there
okay?
is, Mr. Chairman. So the salary of the zoning planner for the portion of the fiscal year that it was vacant was taken for the supplemental.
All right, but you asked the question, I asked the question as a follow-up. You provided clarity to my satisfaction that you've made a decision you won't be funding that position in this budget.
No, that's the zoning planner. That one is funded.
So you are, all right, I'm sorry. It was the zoning planner, administrator
Yes.
Please remind me, what was the position you said that just a few weeks ago someone left?
Zoning administrator.
Zoning administrator?
Yes.
All right, okay, so maybe that threw me off. There was two different references. One was planning,
Oh, I'm sorry.
zoning planner, zoning
Yes,
administrator.
same person, same job.
Okay, thank you,
Sorry,
thank you.
I apologize.
Not a worry.
We're all planners.
Not a worry. But you had also provided information to me that you posted that for that position.
Yes.
So that gives me confidence. You're filling the position. Not a problem. So that kind of falls outside of my concerns.
Okay.
That's
Just
my
wanted to
point.
clarify if needed.
That's my point.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So we talked about, community development is the second half of your department's title. And that's we really got to focus on. I believe we've got to focus on that. And housing. I know housing is a passion of yours. And housing, again, is housing, taxes, and zoning. Those are the three legs that I feel are most critical to a town's financial health. Our zoning, we both know, needs a lot of work. It is a, pardon the expression, it's a bastardized set of rules that has been manipulated by town meetings, and it has been one-offs. There's been no comprehensive approach other than what we did 5 years ago, that all of a sudden there was a number of people in this town who said there was an ulterior motive of this community's leaders to make Braintree into Boston, which was the furthest thing. Okay, and there's still remnants of that going on today. And the master plan is another remnant of that. The master plan is a guideline. It is not zoning. It is, and I don't mean to sound like I'm preaching to you, because I'm the last one to preach to you about these things, okay? Or anybody in this room, actually, to preach to you about that, okay? But for the public's purpose, we need to make sure that these viewpoints, these questions are asked, because there needs to be another side to the story than what we're seeing on social media about we don't need housing. Oh, well, we'll just build commercial. Well, commercial's not going to come without any kind of infrastructure to support it. They're going to go somewhere else that is not going to cost them additional money to have to pay their employees to pay high price of housing or build their housing for them. So it's a common sense economic principle. That's the way things are. And I wish more people in Braintree would see that as there's a connection to that. And nobody's saying we're trying to make us into a city. Braintree used to be a little farm town. And it's changed and evolved and matured. And it's going to continue to do so. So I'll get off that bandwagon, of that stump right now, because I could go on. Anyways, okay. Now, a couple more questions. Printing, you have a pretty big budget for that because of all the paperwork that you have to generate, plans, et cetera.
The printing budget, so by line, is there a specific program that you're looking at, Mr. Chairman, that you're questioning?
Well,
The $1,000 in the conservation one is the flood flyer that goes.
I get worried about you not having enough.
Oh, okay. No,
That's my problem.
We've bumped that up a little bit as needed. We do a lot of printing in-house. We've, mastered the letterhead. We have a plotter. We do get business cards. We do have to do some more outward type stuff from time to time.
Right.
And the majority of that is the flood flyer that goes in the electric bill. They insert that once a year, and that costs us, I think it's a little over $1,000.
Right, right, okay. And from postage, you see, you've only got $200. How do you take care of all the notifications? Are you
So
charging the applicants?
The applicants provide the envelopes. A majority of the postage, what we use that for is, most of it's actually when Kelly needs to do a town project that's
Yep.
related to the Conservation Commission. They have to do the certified mailing. Those get very expensive.
Okay.
So we manage that as best as we can, but it's been sufficient so far.
Okay, thank you. That you're creative too. Not only a hard worker, you're creative. Okay. Meetings. So meetings went from 800 to 1,000. What actually is in the meetings? It looks like it may have been cut off, too, from the description, meeting/S something.
That is, are you, in the planning line item, meetings and seminars in state. So those are various, during COVID, they were kind of low-key, and a lot of stuff was inexpensive and online, and now
Yep.
that they're getting, it's interesting, now that they're getting back in person, you know, you used to be able to go somewhere for 70, 80 bucks. Now those have turned into like about 180, $200 for some of them. Connor and I attended the Urban Land Institute hosted a life science summit, so we went to that. Cost a couple $100 each, but good opportunity to sort of hear what's going on, what's not going on, strengths, weaknesses, pros, cons, things
Is
like
there a
that.
report on that you summarized that? I'd love to see it.
Well, it'd be interesting. There was 2 takeaways from Massachusetts: lack of housing and transportation. So those were the two. So we paid $600 to hear that. But anyways,
Right, exactly.
no, not to be too
Okay,
funny here.
there you go.
So
So
I
the golden goose might be flying to another nest.
So I
I'm
bumped
afraid.
that up a little bit, Mr. Chairman. Another one that we like to hit up every few years is the Housing Institute.
Right.
That's a 2-day summit out in Devens. So we just want to make sure, like, there was something recently that came across, and it was just too expensive for us. So
Okay.
we had to pass on it. So we just bumped that up. I think it was $200, and that would cover, that particular line item covers myself and the assistant director. So, like, pretty much like 2 things a year for 2 people.
Okay. All right, so now I'm looking at page 28, which is economic development, line item 530005, reimburse, it looks like, HIS Y.
Oh, that's the line item for the Historical Society. That appears in my budget. It's actually expended in the mayor's office.
Okay, so that's to help, that's an annual stipend, I don't know how you'd want to categorize it, but that supports the Historical Society
Correct.
to help them financially.
Correct.
Right, right, got it. Okay, and those are kind of relatively small. Let me just see if I had one more item here for you. Okay, there was Regional Economic Community Compact, and the note here is no active member for several years. What was the rationale behind that? And what is the objective in your mind of what the Regional Economic Community Compact is set up to do, and what is its value?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, our involvement in that disassembled long before I took over. So that wasn't something that was active when I became the director. I believe we used to pay $25,000 a year. I don't even know if it's still around, to be honest. I believe the decision to not be part of that was part of the previous administration.
Right, it was, and I do recall that, but it
Yep.
was a regional that we would pay as a group, right? There wasn't anything there, okay? So thank you. I just wanted that to be
Yep.
elevated.
Yep, of
Okay,
course.
thank you. And parking plan, have encumbered funds.
And it's funny, I have another side question, how can I take lines out of Munis, but that's for another day. So you may recall when you were on the planning board, we had Nelson Nelgard come and do a parking inventory.
Very good, yeah.
We did the first stages of that, and then the next stage was gonna be, how do we manage it, how do we implement it, and then things kind of fizzled out. I don't believe there was a desire to get into parking management. I know we touched on that a little bit. We were talking about meters. We were talking about being strategic around that.
Right.
So I have encumbered the funds that were in this line item in previous years. More recently, my department undertook a local rapid recovery plan as part of some of the funding through the state during COVID. We partnered up with MAPC. Margaret and I were just looking at that yesterday, and one of the things that had come up again in that particular plan was, again, parking management, parking supply, and those types of things. So we may be looking to use some of the encumbered funds in the future. We're looking at some of the takeaways from the local rapid recovery planning initiative that was done. There was a lot of good outputs. The outputs have dollar values associated with them, obviously. Literally, nothing's free in this world anymore. So in conjunction with Margaret and looking some of this economic development money and trying to prioritize those outputs along with some previous projects that we've had in the past and the life science efforts, we'll be hopefully seeing some action on those in the near future.
Okay, but as far as parking goes, I would see that as an element, a component of your economic development, particularly of interest to our squares, the
Correct.
Landing, Braintree Square, South Braintree Square, particularly impact on our smaller businesses. And I know the mayor has a focus that that is something of very much of interest to him, is small business. I see this as being a very direct value to that as part of an economic development plan. So again, I'm looking forward to seeing those economic development considerations, and we'll take a look and see. And I'm certain that incorporating this as an element along with those other funds that you mentioned and other initiatives at the state and regional perspective is really what we need to get us out of this cycle of less revenues than expenses year over year. So, okay. That is all that I have for planning and development. I don't have anything further. Are there any more questions from the councilors? Okay. Thank you. All right. Anything for us? No?
No,
Good
thank you.
enough. I appreciate your time. You have a good evening. Oh, yes. What we'll do right now then, that's correct. Thank you for reminding me on that one. All right. So we are going to, I'm going to ask for a motion, 23027, to take off the table order 23027. 26. It says 27
Motion to
on
take off the
top.
table order 23.
Oh, there we go. Do we have a second?
Well, I didn't get all the way through it.
Oh.
Motion to
You're
take
gonna-
off the table order 23026.
Thank you. We have-
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so the floor is yours, Director Rossi.
Thank you very
Santucci
much,
Rossi.
Mr. Chairman. So second part of the department, or I should say maybe a fifth of it, or a sixth at this point, is community preservation. Obviously something very near and dear to a lot of people's hearts, and a way to really kind of improve the community for the residents and future residents as well. So I just did my little cheat sheet here for everyone so they could see. What Ed and I have been doing in the past is we've been looking at averaging the previous years for the state trust fund distribution. The total fund is made up of that, and also the 1% surcharge on the local real estate taxes. So as you can see in the beginning section here, and I'm not sure if people are looking at my little cheat sheet, but I find this much more helpful than the Munis printout. I've got the last 5 years here, and did a 5-year average, a 4-year average, and a 3-year average. Decided to go with the 4-year average, seemed a little bit reasonable. The 3 seems a little high in my opinion. I always like to approach things conservatively from a financial standpoint. So estimating that we'll get about 284 from the state trust fund. And just as a point of information, I found out today that that fund is down about 30%, and that the CPC Coalition, which is the state organization that supports the local community preservation committees, has put in a bill to tap into some of the state surplus funds. So if you have a chance to reach out to your senators or your reps, you might want to ask that they vote in favor of that. That will keep these funds flowing to the communities. So taking the average of the 284 and then the estimated FY .24 1% surcharge, and then throwing a little bit of interest in there, we're at $1,188,590.30. That would be the total available to be expended for the various activities. And then if we look at the proposed FY '24 budget, we have the 10% minimum to go into the buckets. That is defined in the state statute. The buckets being community housing, open space, and historic preservation. Recreation is part of the open space line. We take out the 5% for the admin, and then the rest of the money I put into the undesignated. The undesignated gives the community flexibility. Sometimes things come up that we don't anticipate. Sometimes there's a project that has a lot of community support, and it's looked very favorably upon. So the undesignated gives us the flexibility to use that in any category that we see fit at that given time in the community. So that's basically the CPC budget in a snapshot. I do have a bunch of backup. Everyone loves to ask questions about CPC. So hopefully I have that information if anybody's interested in any of that, balances, expenditures, percentages, and whatnot. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Director. Councilor Flaherty, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I have no questions or comments.
Councilor Maglio, questions or comments?
So the way that I understand this, in terms of the allocations, what we have now as a full unearmarked pool is that 1.1 million or 1.2 million?
That is the total projected available to be put into categories, which I described as housing.
The buckets?
Yes, the buckets,
Okay.
yes.
So what is the full balance?
So the balance, not including this FY '24 money,
Correct.
of all of the quote buckets is $3,755,293.45.
Okay. So,
And that includes even the 15 and change tonight for the historic inventory, which, yeah.
okay, so this 3.7 million includes funds that have been committed to various projects?
Correct. Everything that's been committed to date, including what we discussed this evening.
Okay. How much of this 3.7 million is not committed? Is it just the 1.1 for this year?
No, the 3.7 is all uncommitted. The 3.7 is what is available for expenditures, and the 1.188 is what will be added to the 3.7 once this budget is approved. So
And
that will bump it up to like 4.8 and change.
Okay, and the 15, you're saying that was part of the 3.7, so that would be subtracted from what is available to spend once it's added to the total allocation for FY '24?
Kinda.
So I'm trying to get a sense of, we have projects in the pipeline, and
Yes.
so funds are committed to those.
Yes.
We then also have pools of funds that cover different allocations and that have not been committed yet.
Right. That's 3.75, not committed yet.
3.75.
Yep.
Plus the 1.1.
Correct.
Okay. So 3.75 plus the 1.1. Excellent. So that's 4.855, we'll
Yeah.
say.
Available to be expended.
Okay. And what is the average, do you have the average amount that has been spent or committed or voted on spending? Maybe it hasn't actually left the bank account, but it is committed.
Yes, so the 3.755 number everything that we've done this fiscal year is taken out of that. So I wanted a number that represent a number that's available. So we did some extra money for Middle Street, Town Hall ramp, Delory, and then the 15,000 and change that we spoke about this evening. That is already out of that 3755 number, because
Okay.
I just wanted to give a number that was accurate. So what happens is when a project is voted by the council, and I know this particular one wasn't, but in preparation for the meeting and just being, fully transparent, Liz keeps a running tally, because so if you asked for an account balance from Ed or Mark, if that money isn't, if a contract hasn't been signed yet, it hasn't been flipped. So we keep our own running tally, because in our heads, it's already gone.
It's already spent?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And then we check in back and forth with Ed, and Ed says, thank you, and updates it. Because it's hard, because they're like it's like you write a check and it hasn't been cashed yet. So we're pretending all the checks are cashed.
Right.
So that we know in real time what's actually available.
Excellent. So is there an average amount that is approved per year for the last couple of fiscal years?
So I have a lot of materials here. So on the open space, bear with me here, there's a lot. I don't have it per year, but I can go over. So in 2023, we spent $737 at Delory. And I can share this information in a spreadsheet if that's easier for people.
Oh, that would be much easier.
In '22, we put $300,000 into the Middle Street Trail, Smelt Brook feasibility, $15,000 was appropriated for that. Watson Shoreline, about $30,000. The Nathan Buglia hockey, $450,000. The pickleball courts, $443. And that was in November of 2021. So that's like the last.
Couple years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Excellent.
That's on the open space and recreation. And then on the historic side, we've done the inventory, we've counted the inventory that we just spoke about this evening. Town Hall ramp was $55,000, Elm Street Cemetery, $98,000, and that was it on historic. Before that was the $30,000 on the inventory that we never spent. And that's about it for historic. And then on community housing, we had the Windjammer funds. And before that, that was about 1.1 plus or minus. Before that, the last time we spent money from the housing was 2017. And that was for the Housing Authority.
Okay.
And we also returned some money as well, which Liz went through all the old projects. I mean, some of these are real old. And we returned about 92,000. So that will go back into whatever account it was pulled from.
Okay.
So that might bump, that 100,000 that'll impact the 3.7 number. About another 100,000 on that.
Got it.
We weren't sure if that went back in yet, so we kind of I just have that as to share in case it came up.
As an aside. Okay,
Yep.
excellent. So then one more question about
Yep.
how it works. So with the 125,000 designated, let's say for community housing for '24, if we don't spend that, does that mean next year the 125 would be combined with, or let's say last year's allocation, would that be combined with this so it would be higher, or is it just every year there has to be at least that much, and then you just kind of start over with those allocations? No?
So every year, it has to be, the three buckets have to get 10% of the total amount available. So I rounded up to 125 because I like round 118, it drives me crazy. So And it just keeps going. So for example, right now in the community housing, we have about 442,000.
Okay,
So
that's
it
what I
would
was
just, if
wondering.
we didn't
Yep.
spend it, Counselor, it would just add
Just
to
adds
it and
up.
keep going and keep going.
Stays in that column.
Stays in that column. And it,
Excellent.
and again, based on that money that's in the community housing section, I have these all lined up here with the different buckets, you have to spend it on housing.
Yeah.
The historic, you have to spend on historic. So a project like that, if a housing project came up, we would go to that specific bucket, and if it went over, then we go into the undesignated.
Yep, makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Yep.
Are there any, do you meet in terms of figuring out some strategic ways to use these funds? I know that you have a whole pipeline of potential projects, people that are at various stages. Is it sort of the project that is, that races to the finish line, or is it the project that makes the most sense for a neighborhood, or is it looking to kind of look for equity and try and spend it throughout the town? How does that work?
I would say it's a little bit of all of those things. And I do get some calls, and unfortunately, sometimes I have to just tell people that's not eligible. A lot of the calls I get from residents are maintenance items and like cleanup and that kind of thing, and we can't spend community preservation money on maintenance and cleaning up trash and things like that. So, and actually, some people get very mad at me, and then it goes from there. But nonetheless, we meet with a lot of different people. Some people have some great ideas. Sometimes it's a combination of grants and community preservation money, different initiatives to improve our current facilities that we have, to preserve those facilities and to create those facilities. And then we have a whole hierarchy of projects that are in the, what we call them, in the pipeline. People are talking about them, maybe they're not ready, and we keep the committee updated on those as well, because we're kind of constantly, while we have this 3.7 and this 1.1, we're always, and we don't want to necessarily zero it out either. So, we're kind of frank with people about, don't blow it out of the water. There's other funding sources. We direct people to different places and try to be as fiscally responsible as we can with the taxpayers' money, but also understanding it's real time, and spending money that you collected in 2010 and in 2013. Well, you're getting probably 30 cents on the dollar at that point. So spend it, see the improvement. People are getting taxed on this money. Put it out there so that they can benefit is kind of the philosophy that we try to follow.
Okay, thank you. That's all for me.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Counselor. I don't have any further questions on that. So we are going to take a vote on this.
I know.
Okay, so is there a motion for Order 23026, items C1 through C5, for a favorable recommendation to the full council?
But we make the motions separately and vote on them individually, right? Okay. The following motions are for favorable recommendation to the full council. C1, in accordance with the provisions of Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44B, Section 5, and the recommendation of the Community Preservation Committee, that the sum of $125,000 be appropriated from the Community Preservation Fund to the Community Housing Reserve for acquisition, creation, preservation, or support of community housing, or the rehabilitation or restoration of community housing that is acquired or created as provided in Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44B, Section 5.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
In accordance with the provisions of Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44B, Section 5, and the recommendation of the Community Preservation Committee that the sum of $125,000 be appropriated from the Community Preservation Fund to the Open Space Reserve for the acquisition, creation, or preservation of open space, or the rehabilitation or restoration of open space that is acquired or created as provided in Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44B, Section 5.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
In accordance with the provisions of Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44B, Section 5, and the recommendation of the Community Preservation Committee, that the sum of $125,000 be appropriated from the Community Preservation Fund to the Historic Resources Reserve for the acquisition, preservation, rehabilitation, or restoration of historic resources as provided in Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44B, Section 5.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
In accordance with the provisions of Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44B, Section 5, and the recommendation of the Community Preservation Committee, and that the sum of $754,160 be appropriated from the Community Preservation Fund to the Community Preservation Budgeted Reserve as provided in Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44B, Section 5.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
In accordance with the provisions of Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44B, Section 5, and the recommendation of the Community Preservation Committee, that the sum of $59,430 be appropriated from the Community Preservation Fund to the fiscal year 2024 Administrative Operating Fund as provided in Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44B, Section 5, said funds to be expended under the direction of the Community Preservation Committee and by the Director of Planning and Community Development.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
That's it.
That is it. So, we have that. Thank you very, very much.
Really appreciate it.
We appreciate your work, and we appreciate your taking the time to meet with us this evening and give those thorough answers to our thorough questioning.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so next up, we will, do we have we don't have a revolving fund, do we, on this one?
We have a revolving for municipal license and inspection, as well as elder affairs.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, as far as you're talking about budget, right? Right, so what we'd like to do is we're going to continue, I know we have 23027, but what we're going to do is we're going to continue with 23023.
25, the operating budget,
Excuse me, 25, thank you.
municipal license and
With,
inspection.
no, I'm going to start, let's take Elder Affairs first. That should be, it's a smaller budget, so. We appreciate that. Okay. Good evening. How are you?
I am good.
It's very good to see you. Director Biswas, will you be able to give us any kind of would you like to give any opening remarks?
Sure.
Absolutely. Go right ahead.
Well, good evening. Thank you for having me in here to present my 2024 budget of $3,334,623.77.
Thank you.
And so the overview I was going to give you is, I think a couple of years when I was here, I always said through the help of the town clerk, I always knew the number of older adults in Braintree will be increasing. The 2020 census does indicate that. 2010 census was 8,044. Now we have 10,128 older adults living in the town of Braintree.
And what would
which
you
is,
define older adult? Over what age? Over what age?
over the age of 60. Over the age of 60, we consider them older adults.
I guess that would be me now.
And we welcome them with open arms.
Okay,
As
same
soon as
here.
you're the age over 60. 59, we don't, but
All right.
60 we will.
All right, thank you.
So also, the last few years after COVID or during COVID, last year we have seen a steady but a slow trickling of people coming to our center. This year, it's not slow, it's just a steady trickling of people. I wouldn't call it a trickle. I would say a flood of people coming to our place. It's nice to see the old faces coming back and many new faces are coming in too, that's why we are here and that makes us happy.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you very much. So we'll start with our questions, and I'll ask Councilor Flaherty if she would have any questions or comments.
Well, thank you for the comment that the population of older adults in Braintree is growing. That was one of the questions that I had, because I know from my work on the Master Plan Steering Committee that Braintree is an aging community. So this tracks with what I have been told in other places. And I've looked at your budget. Your budget is basically nothing. You do miraculous things with almost nothing. I think our Elder Affairs program is amazingly robust considering the paucity of resources that you have. And I know that you need more, and I hope someday that we'll be able to get you more, but I really congratulate you on the hard work that you do on making what you have, making the most with what you have, and also, I believe, the writing and the winning of several grants. You win grants every year, I think. Yes. Thank you for doing that hard work.
And this year, I'm especially happy. Mass Councils on Aging, it's not... Hold the mic. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. We got 2 grants from the Mass Councils on Aging, and one is a federal grant which South Shore Elders gives to us, Title 3B. So the Mass Councils on Aging, the grant, it's only $8,000, but it's called a respite care grant. It allows me to ask people who takes care of their loved ones who has dementia, for them to go out for a little bit and have someone come to their house to take care of their loved ones. And today, one person just returned from London. Of course, we are not giving him a whole lot of money. He just returned from London because he could leave his wife. He could leave the house for, I don't know, for 10 years. He could leave his wife in London. He loves trains. Every day he boarded on different trains, and he came back, and he just saw me today, and he said how much he appreciated his going away and taking some respite time. There's another lady who took a vacation, I don't know how many years. The mother was left to a caregiver, she went to Aruba. So that was another one I am going to. So those makes your heart. That's why you are here, and when you hear stories like that, that makes you very happy. The other grant I'm very excited about, again, it's not a lot of money, but it is to make Braintree dementia friendly. I have already spoken with the police, the fire, and I'm going to talk to the Alzheimer's Association, and we're going to do some training for dementia, for the merchants in Braintree. So once you see a person walk into a gas station thinking of driving to Florida, to pick up some of the signs and redirect the person. The training, this is a federal grant, so the money will be expiring September 30th, so I have some time to work with the Alzheimer's Association, Town Council, the Mayor's Office, the police, fire, the merchants, to have a very good training where people can actually understand what a person goes through when they have dementia. So I'm very excited about these 2 grants.
I think those are wonderful. And
Thank you.
congratulations on writing and winning those awards. Anybody who takes care of another person with a lot of need has to be able to get the rest that they need to be able to do it right, to do it well, to do it without wearing themselves out. So I don't have any questions for you, but I do want to share with you my deepest thanks for the work that you do for this community, because I think it means a lot.
Thank you, and I'm going to carry this message to the staff, because unless they were dedicated and loyal to what we do, the purpose we serve, we couldn't have done this. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Maglio, questions or comments?
Thank you. You came to a Ways and Means Committee meeting a couple of months ago, and we talked about your program and its lean nature. So I would concur with Councilor Flaherty. I made a lot of comments at that meeting. I would agree with the comments she made tonight. And I think the only thing I would add to that is that running such a lean program that has the mission of caring for almost a quarter of the residents of the town if everyone were to be in need. You have to have a definite level of compassion, of patience, of dedication, because that is an extremely vulnerable population to work with.
Yes.
So for people to feel like they are welcomed and they are guests and they can have their needs met and they can have some understanding from someone throughout the day is a very important role, and I'm glad that we have that, and I too wish it could be a larger program with more staff, with more services, but hopefully that's something that we can see happen in the future, and I would say thank you to you and to all of your staff as well.
I also just want to mention our outreach program. I always talk about the activities, the programs, people coming in, going on trips, but there is also a population, especially after COVID, mental health, substance use, frailty has become a real big problem, and they're all isolated. So our outreach department helps with people who are isolated, frail. We have a friendly visitor program, again from a grant, who goes, it's just for companionship. So she will go into houses and she will just speak with the people who are totally very lonely. Other than her, they don't have anyone. So outreach also does a phenomenal job of people who really can come to the senior center and have a party. And of course, our transportation. The few drivers we have, and Frank DeFrancesco, who's our main man, he does things which he's not supposed to do. We have curb-to-curb service. He will do much more than that. He will look for the doctor's office because people have dementia and they don't forget. So sometimes I'll just tell him, Frank, just don't tell me what you're doing, just do it. So I have to say the staff, I'm not going to say they're overly paid, but I think the compassion and the dedication they have keeps us going. So thank you for appreciating that.
You're very welcome. Actually, your comments about outreach reminded me of one question I did have. For the population that you work with, or for just that larger figure of older adults, do you have a list of who they are? And if there were to be an emergency, is there some sort of a plan in place per neighborhood to reach out to them?
The outreach department will have that list. And usually during a winter storm, which hasn't happened this winter, or like severe heat, or actually during COVID when people did not have enough food in their house, they do have a list, and we call. We call the people personally just to find out. The people I was saying, like friendly visitor, we know they are vulnerable older adults, so they are in our list. We have something partnership with the library called Library Express. We take books from the library to people who like to read but really cannot go out. They are all in our list of people who will need help. So we have them in our list, and the outreach department knows about. I know about them too, but we do have the list.
So for like the recent chemical fire at Clean Harbors, was there a list of people that, with some rapid mobilization to remove people from their homes, help them leave their homes if they needed to?
If you remember, Counselor, I think I was once in a meeting and I did ask, because there may be plans, but what happens to the people who's on a wheelchair, who cannot go out? Fortunately, we do not have vulnerable elders who live there who cannot really do it on their own, or they have family members who can help them. So we did not have too much of an issue with that chemical fire.
Well, there wasn't an actual evacuation.
Whatever happened there, we didn't have too much to go out and help. But of course, if something happens like that, we will definitely be out there, at least not out there ourselves, but communicating with the officials.
So there really isn't a plan for people in wheelchairs to actually be evacuated, is what we had talked about at that meeting.
Yes, and the wheelchair people, I mean, they are not the older adults who will come, who we know about.
Okay.
Who we know about. But if we do, I don't think there are people who are over 60 who cannot transport on their own, but that was a question in my mind when I went to that meeting.
Yep.
We were talking about if the ambulance would move them.
If the ambulance would move people,
Yeah.
In case of an emergency, ambulatory transport could be.
I can't hear you.
If there was an emergency, ambulatory transport could be provided.
Right, so,
I mean, you're talking if someone is ambulatory, right?
and I'm talking big emergency,
yeah.
where I think that's an important part of the planning that needs to happen. So how many people would you say go through, that you're in touch with? How many elders in the town are you in touch with?
You mean for emergency?
For just your program?
Just my program? Okay, this I can just give you an idea. Like last year,
Yeah.
duplicated, it's not unduplicated. We served about 12,876, close to 13,000 people. This is duplicated. This year, the year is not over yet. It's about 16,500. So it shows how much we have, proceeded with the people, connecting with the people.
Right, so
And
duplicated means one
Duplicated-
person might come 20 times or
we
twice?
count that as 20.
Right.
And unduplicated, we count that person as one.
Do you have an unduplicated count?
Yes, we do. So the unduplicated amount is 1,108, and that was from last year. This year, it is close to 1,200 people.
1,200, okay.
Yeah.
So out of the 10,000 older adults in Braintree, about 10% of them, 1,200, are known to the Council
Yes.
on Elders, and who are getting some kind of touch, whether
Touch
it's
with us.
outreach, whether it's internal. So that leaves a lot. And it's good to know those folks that are on your list, that you're saying all of them are mobile, all of them
These are
would
mobile people, yes.
have a plan in place. So I guess then the other
But
thing.
I'm counting the outreach people. This is the total people served.
Yep,
So I was just thinking when I was talking to you, we have a database called My Senior Center, and that lists all the people that comes with phone numbers, next to kin. If something happens, that system, I think, has the capability to make a robocall. Sometimes when some activity is canceled, we will pick up those people and do a robocall. And these are things we need to think about, and you just made me think about it, and definitely we will be thinking about that.
excellent. Because I guess there's the 1,200 people that you know of that are in your universe of services, and then there's the other, 9,000 people in town who aren't connected to you, who may be older, who there is no information on whether they're mobile or not, or whether they can get themselves out or not. So that's just something to think about.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can only worry about the people that you're reaching out to and
Yeah.
that are coming in.
And
But-
actually, when I say the 1,200, when I do my annual report, it's different. I see because this is just people who are doing our events. And people who are just taking our rides. There is more to it. At the end of the year, when I do my annual report for the state, it's about 3,000 people
Okay.
who actually come to the center. This is just a very rough, quickly I just assembled these before I came here. So it's about 3,000 people most of the time.
Okay.
Last 2 years it was less, but I am hoping this year it will be higher
More.
up. Yes.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you very much. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Counselor. So I'd like to also say that you do a wonderful job, Director, and, you know, these are dear folks in our population. They're special in the sense that they've lived a long time. There's a lot of wisdom that collects on a daily basis
Yes.
down on Cleveland Avenue. And there's a cross-section of considerations that, with a very small budget, that you've been able to deliver an incredible value. So to you and to your entire staff, thank you very, very much. Greatly appreciate everything that you do. I only
Thank you,
have
Councilor.
really one question for you on the budget itself. So it would have to do with, there is a line that I'm not, I'd ask if you could help me with. It's page 83. It would be under Elder Affairs Equipment Maintenance. 524003. It says outside M/.
Outside motor vehicle repair.
Got it.
I
Thank
don't know
you.
why they have outside in there.
Uh-huh.
I guess it was from when I started, it always says outside motor vehicles. It is the vehicles we have.
Right. We know that you have some very old
Four. Yeah, one
vehicles.
is considering, I was going to go for a grant this year, but I did not. I'll do it next year. So it's the vehicle, the oil change, the inspection, the tire change. I think we have a small Nissan van. I think we had to do the transmission. So that took a lot of money. So that's the outside. I guess outside motor vehicles is that.
Okay, well, that clears it up for me, so I
Yes.
thank you. I just want to ask if there are any further questions from the members of the committee for Director Biswas. No. So, we thank you again,
Thank you.
and I hope you have a good evening.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
She does have a revolving fund, 23027.
Oh, thank you very much. So, we will need a motion to take that off the table. So is there a motion to take 23026 off the table?
Motion to take 23026 off the table?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Are there any questions, Councilor Flaherty?
I-
Yes.
Yeah.
Revolving
is.
fund.
Motion to take off the table
Sorry,
order.
027. I screwed it up before with it, referencing it previously, and I was corrected. Okay, thank you.
Motion to take off the table order 23027.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Director Spellman. Okay, so are there any questions from the councilors on the revolving funds for, where is the, thank you, 027, for Elder Affairs Service and Activities?
Not for me.
Okay, none from Councilor Flaherty. Councilor Maglio.
No questions.
I have no questions either, so thank you very much. We appreciate your time. Okay, and I appreciate Director McGrath waiting patiently, and she's always ready. Good to see you.
You as well. Thank you, Mr.
All
Chairman.
right. Okay, so any opening statements you'd like to make?
I'd like to
Director.
thank you, Chairman Reynolds, and the council members for allowing me the opportunity to appear before you this evening to present my FY24 budget. What you will see in the budget is there are increases in salary line items. The other general operating expenses, you will see shifts in amounts within those line items, but you will not see an increase in those other general line items, such as office supplies, such as postage, printing. They may have shifted within the programs, but there's been no increase. And I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have this evening.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll start with Councilor Flaherty, please.
Thank you. When I look at your budget, I see that 93% of that is bound up in salary. And I'm wondering if you can just enumerate for me the people who work in the office.
Certainly. So within the department, beside myself is an inspector of buildings. We have a vacant local building inspector position, wiring inspector, plumbing and gas inspector, ADA/code compliance officer, office manager, public health nurse, 2 health code enforcement officers, substance use prevention coordinator. We have an alternate building inspector who also assists us with weights and measures. We have an alternate plumbing and gas inspector and an alternate wiring inspector. So 10 full-time and 3 alternates.
Okay, and as we have been in very tight budget conditions for several years in a row now, and I'm wondering, have you sustained the same number of full-time employees and alternates over the past few years, or have you taken cuts to your staffing?
We've taken cuts to staffing.
Okay, so which positions have you lost in the last, I would say, 3 or 4 years?
Okay. So going back to 2021, there was a vacant building inspector. I used to have 3 local building inspectors and inspector of building. And presently, there is an inspector of buildings and 1 local building inspector position that's vacant. So over the years, I've sustained a loss of 2 local building inspector positions. We used to also have a part-time clerical staff member, and that was zeroed out as well within the last, I believe, 2 years, since 2022.
Okay, that was a lot of information very fast, so I'm going to try and make sure I have it right, because I don't think I do. You have lost in the last couple of years 2 local building inspector positions, and then a clerical position?
A part-time clerical.
Part-time clerical. And so you usually, when the office is fully funded, how many inspectors do you have then total?
At present, or with what
When it's
I've
fully
lost?
funded, before you've lost these positions?
When it would be fully funded, I would have 3 local building inspectors and 1 inspector of buildings. We would also have another clerical staff member, which would have been a part-time position.
What's the difference between a local building inspector and a building inspector?
Building inspector is more like a commissioner, and the local inspectors would work under the commissioner.
Okay. And 1 clerical person?
Yes. In addition to the office manager.
1 full-time clerical?
It would have been, it was funded previously for part-time clerical.
1 part-time clerical. Right.
I would have no
Right.
objection to a full-time clerical, though.
I'm sure you would not. I would have no objection to 1 full-time clerical just for my house. At any rate. Okay, so the reason I ask these questions is because you are one of the very few departments which generates revenue. And when you have fewer people doing the business that generates the revenue, you generate less revenue.
Correct.
Can you characterize the extent to which your office has generated less revenue because of these cuts?
Well, some of the activity, I mean, we're sustaining the bare minimum that we have to meet in obligations. And I say minimum, you know, I'm being careful in saying that because we're getting to all of the things, for example, the building inspector. He is meeting all of the requests for inspections. But there are other things that we should be involved with, is more enforcement on just being able to go around the community to be able to see activities that we normally wouldn't be able to. For example, the building inspector has, you know, he has a set schedule. He will do the inspections that are requested. If he's out and about and he sees activity that's occurring, he's not familiar whether or not there may be a permit on it, he would call back to the office, see if there's a permit. If there is, see what activity is occurring. But we feel like there's a lot of activity that may be occurring that we're just not capturing because I don't have enough staff to do that.
Okay, so what you're telling me then is that we are meeting the bare minimum obligations to inspect buildings when called upon to do so. But what we're not doing is the enforcement.
We're doing enforcement too, yes. We are doing enforcement. There's just a lot out there that we feel like we're not able to capture. I just don't have enough people to do it.
I know you are doing enforcement when it comes to your attention, but you're
Right.
you're not able to do as much enforcement.
Right. For example, I would like to be able to do a comprehensive just review throughout the town on signage. Window signage, signage that may be like the A-frame little signs going through out the community to look at signage. I don't have the staff to do that right now.
Okay.
That's just an example of many things that we'd like to be able to do.
Do we track revenue from enforcement when there's a violation and we fine people? Do we track those revenues?
It would go into the general fund.
Can I ask Director Spellman, do we track those once they're into general fund?
The funds would be deposited into a specific account, yes.
Into a specific
Yeah.
account?
So if we were to do any ticketing, the funding from any revenues coming from ticketing would go through the town clerk's office.
It would go through the town?
That's the structure in which we have for the non-criminal disposition, the tickets, if they're written, the payments made to the town clerk's office.
Can you give me a for example so I can understand?
An example of a ticketing?
Yeah, just any old violation. A violation happens, it is detected by your department, then what happens?
So I'll give you an example on the health side. We have a trash complaint, and we'll send a nuisance order requesting that it be corrected within a prescribed time frame. And if that isn't done, we would go back to do a compliance inspection, then we write a ticket on it. The ticket has to be paid within 21 days, or we would, progress to move forward in court as necessary. The goal and objective is to get it corrected.
Yes. The goal of the objective is to get it corrected. But the money is really helpful too. And what I want to know is how much less money are we able to generate through that activity than we are doing right now?
I couldn't give you a dollar figure. First of all, when we issue the tickets, as I said, the money would go to the town clerk's office, so they could give you a summary of revenues in those tickets. But again, as you had mentioned, because I don't have the staff, I don't have someone going around ticketing, I just don't have the staff to be able to do that. If we were called out in a complaint or there's something that is observed in the course of the day in our duties that we see as a violation, first start with a warning letter or a nuisance complaint in order to correct, and then progress there. So it's progressive discipline. We certainly would like, as I said, to have compliant or voluntary compliance when they're noticed on it or an order is written. If they don't, the next step is a ticket.
Okay.
And then progressing into court if necessary.
We have such a tight budget that the amount of revenue that your office generates matters. And I'm trying to get at a number for how much we've lost as a consequence of the reduction in staff. And I can appreciate that that's a hard number to arrive at because there's a lot that goes into it. But what I'm hearing from you is that I need to talk to the town clerk about those numbers.
As far as tickets, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep, just as far as tickets. Yes? Okay. This year you have a small increase in your total budget, but I think you've taken cuts in past years. How much were you cut last year?
I wasn't able to fulfill any cuts last year. I just couldn't find any places in the budgets to be able to do that.
And the year before that?
The year before that was over 10%.
That's what I thought I remembered
Yeah.
that.
which was about $107,000. $107,660 to be exact.
Okay. Because so much of your salary is locked up, so much of your budget is locked up in salary, that means the value of the money that we're allocating to your department comes from the work of the people who work for the department. And one of the things that you've commented on in the past and when you've come before this body is that all of your records are stored over on Pond Street.
The construction plans are stored at Pond Street, 74 Pond Street.
Construction plans. How many times a week do you have to go over there?
It really depends upon the number of public record requests, but it's not unusual for me to be going over there maybe once every 2 weeks or so.
Once every 2 weeks?
Yeah, to 74 Pond Street. The paper files, the general building file, is here locally within the town hall, so I'm able to access them easier. The construction plans, we have 76 recycle bins full of construction plans in the basement of 74 Pond Street.
They're in recycle bins?
They're in recycle bins because we need the volume and something that would be able to store them safely without taking on any moisture.
And recycle bins meet that need?
It has. I know it's a creative way of trying to store them because of the volume, but it was also a space constraint too. I mean, if you went into the basement of 74 Pond Street, we take up half of it.
I hope that they're the wide bins and
They
not
are.
the large.
They are. They're the largest of the recycle bins that are offered. Mr. Kuntz with recycling was able to help us with those because we had to get very creative when we were trying to figure out how to store this volume of documents in a relatively small space.
But you have to, how do you find them when you need them?
So we have a listing, before they were placed in the bins, we listed what the property address was. So we have a listing of everything alphabetized and which bin it's in.
Okay. When you need to get something, how long does it take you?
Oftentimes, the one property can have multiple sets of construction plans, so it's a matter of going into each of the assigned bins and looking for them. Some bins can have upwards of, 50 sets of plans. So you have to go through every set to see which one is the exact document you're looking for.
Okay. How long does it take?
Upwards of an hour, if not more.
Okay, so 1 hour every 2 weeks or so?
Mhm.
And all the rest of the files that you use as part of your regular work are stored here at Town Hall?
Correct.
All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Maglio.
Thank you. That was really interesting. It's like it's 1980 in terms of the way those are being
know.
stored. Did you say 76?
We have 76 recycle bins, the large recycle bins.
Okay,
And we have extras in case we need them for additional storage.
right. Okay. So I have some questions about some of the operations in terms of, when you talk about tickets, that it's a ticket because it's some sort of a violation.
Correct.
What is the system for violations to come to your attention?
So that we have a see-click-fix system through the town. That's, I guess you'd call it a complaint-based online system. That's one method. And then we often get calls and persons coming into the office to register complaints as well.
So what is the process of registering a complaint?
If they
Whether
do,
they call or come in?
if they do it through the online system, it's
Not
very-
see-click-fix?
Not through see-click-fix.
No.
If they call or come in, we do have forms for each side, both health and building, and it's documented what the complaint is, the location of the complaint. We try and get as much information as we can to try and go out and follow up on the complaint.
So those violation forms, whether somebody comes in or calls, that's what gets filled out. And so what would you say we have so far for FY '23 for violation
gosh.
forms?
I would probably say in the several, maybe upwards of several hundred. That's a guess, though. I couldn't say for certain. I'd have to go through and tally them all.
So, yeah, I would be interested in hearing how many violations for FY '23, FY '22, FY '21. I think this is important data. And then based on how many violations there are, How many resulted in a ticket? Because I imagine some of them you go out and you say, that's not a violation, or some of them you go out and you say, hey, that's a violation, and the homeowner or the restaurant owner or whatever it is says, oh, sorry, I didn't realize, and they take care of it right away. But then some of them, they might ignore you, and then it goes to a ticket. So what is the percentage, or actually the amount that resulted in a ticket? And then from there, what dollars those tickets brought in. So I would ask you, Mr. Spellman, whether even if it goes to the clerk, wouldn't that be something that ultimately you would know?
We would have that in our records, but I believe the town clerk has already presented to the council a list of fines and tickets he's received over the current year and then the prior several fiscal years, I believe.
So those numbers of fees that he received, that correlates back to, that included the municipal license, and those are based on tickets, violations that you write, or your staff write?
They could be. I may not be the only department that writes tickets, though.
Okay, so
That
that's
go to
what
the
I'm
town
looking
clerk.
for, is to come up with that number. And if that was on, I don't have all of my files with me, I just have this big one. I leave all the rest at home, so if that's an easy email to send me, that would be great. And then, related to that, we now have a blight ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a number of times that I know that a blight ordinance has been written, and that fines the blight ordinance has a certain period of time that after those days kick in, we charge, I think it's $350 a day, the fines are, for like a commercial property, for a store, for a residence, for whatever the entity is, there's a certain amount. So I would also wonder how much we have collected in blight fines. And so specifically, I know even in terms of apartment buildings, I know there's one there's been years-long efforts with, and in fact, the judge, and it has been in court, and the judge had said that fines could be issued. I'm wondering how much has been issued in fines and how much we've collected in all of those categories. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think those are really important numbers, and I would like to see those. So then the other thing is, in terms of those, let me see, let me get to my other. The last thing I think is the connection, because with those kinds of cuts, losing staff, I would assume that things like, checking restaurants, like how often are restaurants checked for violations?
So they're based on a risk category: low risk, medium risk, or high risk. Low risk would be such establishments as, let me think, like say a liquor store that may have milk, or a very limited amount of, other than alcohol beverage or non-alcohol beverage, other food products. A medium risk establishment would be something like a Burger King, McDonald's, a general restaurant. A high risk establishment is an establishment that serves a population that could be compromised, such as a nursing home, daycare, schools. The low risk are done requirement at least once a year, medium risk twice a year, and high risk 3 times. Now, an establishment, if they sustain several critical violations, they can be bumped from one risk category into another. For example, say from a medium risk into a high risk because of the number of critical violations that they may or could sustain during an inspection. They could stay on that list, the higher risk category, until they clearly demonstrate to the satisfaction of the inspectors that they are meeting compliance, and they can be moved back down into a lower risk.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so what would you say, and there's did you say there's 2 people that do this?
2 health code enforcement officers.
And how many of these facilities are there in Braintree?
We have upwards of over 200 food establishments.
So 200 food establishments, so that's at least 200 visits, right? If they were all low, that would be 200 visits. If they were medium, that would be 400. If they were high, that would be 600. So somewhere in between 200 and 400 visits, I would guess. So, and is that what the health is, are those actually happening with 2 staff?
To the best that we can. I mean, that's not the only thing that we're enforcing on the health side. We're also doing housing inspections. We're also doing nuisance complaints. Swimming pools, beaches, lots of other types of establishments that also have to be inspected.
So there's really no way, I would say, I would venture a guess, that all of that work is happening.
It's with difficulty.
It's not physically possible.
No.
And I think that is another area of where the town, if people are okay with that, then fine. People are okay with that. But I think people really need to be aware of the kinds of decisions that are being made. And this is once again a look at priorities. Do we want restaurants that there have been visits in the back room and in the kitchens according to the schedule that these visits are supposed to be made, or not? Because if we don't care, then I guess we will continue to not fund these positions. Do we want swimming pools and housing? Do we want violations to carry on for years in some of these properties in Braintree and not have them ultimately addressed? We're losing out, people are losing out on a quality of life. Consumers are losing out on perhaps clean meals and safe swimming. Residents are losing out on where they're shopping or living or eating. And I think that's a big problem. The last piece is around that whole proactive. You mentioned when somebody's out and about, if they see something, there really isn't that flexibility to be able to do something. And so when I think about the connection between public health, public safety, clean air, clean water, I think about how we are sorely lacking. And once again, we're making a decision to not fund the positions that will keep us healthy and keep us safe. At a Board of Health meeting, you stated that there is no connection between the health department, the Board of Health, and something like Clean Harbors and that chemical fire that happened, that you had no actual role or connection to that emergency. And I think that is another area where we are putting people at risk. We are ignoring well-documented needs of the community, and we are just kind of hoping that something doesn't happen, but yet people think that there is an actual presence, that a department called the Board of Health would be able to do all of these things, would be able to go and do all of the inspections and to work on all of these proactive areas. And I think it's very important to clearly say that that is not the case, and that trying to do it all is great, but it's not all happening.
I appreciate your comments, Counselor. I will say I'm extremely proud and blessed with the staff that I have. They are incredible individuals and always go above and beyond on a daily basis, and I appreciate that, not only for myself, but on behalf of the town. But I am short-staffed, there's no question about it. Would I like more staff? Yes, I would. I do understand the concerns that other departments have as well. I would certainly support all of those departments, but I do absolutely need more staff. There's no question about it.
And being able to justify that by keeping track of the kinds of fees and violations and fines and and those kinds of revenue opportunities that are right there in front of us, that already exist, that are already part of our ordinances, already part of our policies, already in motion, and to not actually have those figures, know what those figures are, be able to look at those figures from year to year, I think that's one of the missed opportunities. And because I'm going to guess that it's not a lot. That's what I'm going to guess, is that there aren't a lot of, but I don't know. So being able to, so I'm hoping to get that, and I'm hoping you find it useful and valuable to be able to look at, here's what we could be doing if we had 2 more health inspectors, if we had somebody going out and actually charting I reported a blight circumstance that literally, the picture I took last summer is the exact same as the picture I took this summer. There has been zero change in that picture, but they're still working on it. That's $350 a day. That is a blight condition that everybody who drives by that property needs to deal with, needs to be confronted with, that this is okay to exist like this, decrepit, dangerous, unattractive, filthy, in a neighborhood, and where they're just working on it indefinitely. And that continues on. And I don't know whether it is a staffing issue, so nobody's tagging these things. I don't know whether there's no will to actually enforce these things, if you need an enforcement department, or if there needs to be some other conduit for this, but I think it's an area that would clean up the town, would create some simple, easy ways to beautify some really blighted areas that people have been complaining about for years, at least in the, I don't know, I've lived here for 12 years. At least in the 12 years I've lived here, these have been raised as issues, and they are not addressed year after year after year after year. Even with now what we have, there's some teeth, because it was a year ago that the council passed a blight ordinance, and yet we're not using it, and I don't understand why. So I'd like to just kind of throw that out there, and whoever can and will get back to me with that information, I would greatly appreciate it. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Okay. Inspector McGrath, you do quite a job with very little money. I would agree. You need more staff. And so that part of that is, and I echo what has been said by my fellow counselors. There is a direct correlation for having the staff the full staff that you require to have a higher level of confidence in the community that we are collecting revenues that we can. But I think that's secondary to the health and welfare that workload that you have, and that what you remarkably are able to address. But you have advocates here for more on your staff. Okay, we see the direct value in two very distinct areas. Health and welfare being the first of our community, our residents, the second, missed opportunities to help us collect revenues. And they feed each other, in a sense. Like, if we don't have the revenues, we cannot put in place revenue generators. We don't have revenue generators, we don't get any revenues. So it's a very endless loop, if you will, of just missed opportunities. So on staffing, I'm looking at your budget, your staffing in Appendix L. It doesn't appear to me that you have any kind of unfulfilled budget, unfulfilled funded positions. Is that correct?
Unfulfilled funded positions.
Meaning they're vacant.
We have one vacant building inspector position currently, yes.
And is that being put out for?
It's been out for over a year.
So it's been out you're not getting any responses on it.
The responses we got, and they're just not qualified for the position.
I see,
Yeah.
I see.
Unfortunately, what we've seen across the board in the Commonwealth since COVID, and I hate to go back to COVID, but
Yeah.
since COVID and in the aftermath of COVID, professionals that were in this field, that they're getting up to the point that they're considering retirement. And it was a difficult time for persons working in the field as inspectors, just across the board, that those that are close to retirement or have the opportunity to, they've taken that initiative and opportunity to do,
Right.
which leaves many positions vacant, not only in Braintree, but in other communities. So basically now we're kind of competing and fighting for those individuals to entice them to whichever community is looking to fulfill and fill the
And
staff.
that's a stark fact.
It is.
It really is.
But
And
it's not just on the building side, it's also on the health
It's
side,
throughout
too.
the entire town. There's a lot of positions that we cannot fill, that we want to fill. However, we are not able to compete with other communities who are offering more money and also compete with the private sector as well. Another reason, another motivating reason for us to look at every means possible to generate more revenue so that we can offer more. I mean, there's so many reasons that we could walk through tonight of what does the lack of revenues do to our community? How does it tie our hands? How does it, and is it acceptable for us to just throw our hands up and say, well, I guess that's just the way it is. In my book, it's not acceptable, because as a taxpayer, we're being underserved. We are being underserved. So, is that one position, is that the one where you had 3 local inspectors, now you're down to 1?
Yes,
Okay.
currently we're down to the one vacant one.
You're down to 1 filled position, but you
We have an
another.
inspector buildings that's filled, the
But
local
one is
building
vacant.
Correct.
Got it. Terrific. And we don't have a code compliance officer, right? That's a double duty, if you will?
Other
for-
staff members are taking
Yeah.
those duties on. yeah.
Okay. And I know that during COVID, speaking of, that you deputized, I guess, I don't know if that's the right term, a number of health inspectors.
We
off of your-
deputized actually some building staff members to assist
Right.
as you may be aware, when COVID kind of, rolled out, all of the enforcement and the case investigation, contact tracing, enforcement was with the local health departments throughout the Commonwealth. And that being said, as you can imagine, we were inundated with complaints on a
Right.
daily basis.
Right.
With social distancing, masking, and things like the preventative measures that were put in place at the state level. And clearly, there was no opportunity to be able to hire staff because there wasn't anyone around to hire
Right.
in order to help. So working with Mayor Kokoris and the chief of staff at the time, got somewhat creative and asked if there was an ability to deputize building staff that
Right.
were willing to assist with this, to do things such, the health inspectors were focusing on food aspects, because I wanted them to delve into that.
Right.
Such things as complaints that we got complaints on gas stations, we got complaints on car wash.
Yep.
Just across the board, retail-type establishments complaints. So they were able to help in those duties, be able to help us to conduct the enforcement that was necessary and required, but yet it was not an added burden to the town by hiring additional staff. So
Right.
we got a little
So
creative.
that was a great example of kind of responding to the moment of the crisis that was just unprecedented. So there wasn't, I guess in one way, your building inspectors weren't necessarily fully resourced in building inspection because it just wasn't happening for a short amount of time. So that worked out. So again, we don't have that option in a non-COVID environment.
No, we don't.
We don't have that option. So again, it's another great illustration, I think, of what are we doing to in this town to generate revenues. Or is there, the alternative to not generating more revenues is to cut spending. That's really the math. So, okay. That's all that I have for questions for you as it concerns to your department. And yes, go right ahead, Chief of Staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may, I just want to compliment Director McGrath and her team and their responsiveness to Councilor Maglio's point. His complaints come in, and we bring them to their attention. They're right on it. But more so on the revenue side, to your comments, Mr. Chairman, Director McGrath weekly comes up in her meetings with the mayor, meetings with myself, and brings forward, here's the permits issued this week, these are the revenues she was generated. And, you know, there was quite the, when the permits fees have been received for, you know, for example, for Tri-Town, it was a big one, and, you know, we weren't waiting for the meeting. She was excited to come and share that information. So for a team that really, you know, gives their heart day in and day out, we've got terrific employees here in the town of Braintree who do a lot with a little.
Right, I would agree with you, definitely. Well said.
Yeah, I was excited. I've never actually had a $1.4 million check in my hand, so I needed to make sure that I showed that to someone.
That must have been exciting. All right. All right, I'm going to ask if there are any further questions on the budget aspects of licensing inspection from any of the committee members. No. Okay, terrific. So we do have one remaining piece of business, and that would be, we have already opened up 23027. Are there any questions from either, or from any of the committee members, and is in terms of the continuation of revolving funds for immunization and the Board of Health?
Second.
No. Do you have any questions?
Oh, sorry. No.
All right. That's okay. All right. All right, so that being said, we're all set. So thank you for your time. We greatly
Thank you. And
appreciate that.
I do appreciate the comments and questions that the counselors made this evening, and I appreciate your support for what we're all trying to do in prevention.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Okay, so let's see here. We have to table both motions. So we will take up first, is there a motion to table order 23027 to our Ways and Means meeting on May 17th?
Motion to table order 23027 to the Ways and Means meeting on May 17th.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And do we need to table
order
26?
now.
No.
That's
20
done.
That's all
completed
done.
business. And table 25.
23025, yes.
Right. Okay. Do we have a motion to table, or to table order number 23025 to May 17th?
Motion to table order 23025 to May
Okay.
17th.
Great. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. And is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time this evening.
Nice
Yeah.
job, 5 of 8.
5